In today's episode, I speak to Dino Paulo, owner of HintHunt South Africa, an escape games business that delights itself in creating the most challenging puzzles for its customers. In Dino's case, the biggest riddle he's had to solve is the one of learning how to find his own voice within his own business, dealing with things like partner theft and COVID. It's an amazing story filled with self-reflection. There is so much to learn, and Dino is such a great person to learn from. I do hope you enjoy, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think. One more thing, this episode is audio only because my name's Kieran Naidu, and this is the Self Starters. If you're listening, there's only one excuse as to why you're not getting started on your idea right this moment. And that's because you're finishing this episode first. Dino, hello.
Kieran, what's up, dude?
Welcome to the Self Starters podcast.
Thanks, man.
You know, you're quite lucky in the sense that, unlike my other guests, I actually took you out to lunch first.
I know, what a win. I feel super special.
Yeah, you better deliver. Now, Dino, for the people who don't know what makes you a self-starter, you're the owner of a business called HintHunt, which is an escape game business.
Yeah.
You know, if people don't know what an escape game business is, think about those games that became very popular over the last 5 or 6 years, where you're put into a room called an escape room, and you have a time limit in which you and your friends need to find out how to get out. And there's a bunch of puzzles that you need to solve in order to get out the room. And if you don't get out the room, you die. Is that correct?
Something like that. Although, actually, no. We thought about doing that. It wasn't good for business or repeat customers, so we had to kind of like check that idea. But yeah, I mean, the way we describe it is you get put in a themed room, you get immersed in a new world, and generally our games at this stage are 60 minutes long, so you've got 60 minutes to solve a series of clues and puzzles to try and escape the room, and it is a lot of fun. And that is exactly why when I heard of the concept, it was something I was like, geez, that suits me. I like this. This is something I want to do, and I'd love to be a part of putting that out into the world. You know, to be able to put fun out into the world is would be great. So yeah, I mean, it intrigued me as just as a person who's always looking for fun things to do, and as somebody who like looked for opportunities in things and saw a bit of an opportunity.
And I mean, I completely get your point around, you know, it's something that it excited you. It's something that you would find fun doing. Where I lose you and where I'd love to get your insight is, it feels like quite a leap to go from that to investing your life savings in starting this business and being like, yeah, I can see a future where this business sustains me, and that's where you are. But I'd love for you to share your thinking at that time around, you know, when given the opportunity to invest into HintHunt, what made you excited about the opportunity? What made you think like, yeah, this is an opportunity that will bear fruit for the future?
It's crazy, and I'm going to try to give you the condensed version of the story. But I was in the tobacco retails trade, and I had a minority share in some tobacco retailers that I helped, expand. And I had just come off the back of, wanting to have started my own business on the side for myself purely, which was a Chisanyama, a franchise, a fast food franchise, and that failed, and I lost all the money that I put into it at that stage, and I lost everything. Hard lessons learned there. And although the tobacco industry was quite lucrative for me at the stage, there were things that just didn't align with me, right? And one day I'm sitting there in the office, and my best mate sends me a message one day saying, check out this concept. Now, Rocco is my best mate, and we would chat literally every day about ideas, literally every day. The dumbest ideas you've ever thought of on like how we could make money somehow, and every now and then there was like a bit of a gem, and this was one of them that he sent me this link to this concept of, escape rooms, and it was exploding in Europe. And this was about 2015 when he sent it to me, and people were doing these things like in their garages, low budget, like super low startup cost, mega returns. It just looked really, really good. And I was like, okay, that's cool from a business perspective, but my word, this sounds like a lot of fun. And I decided it was something I wanted to look into. And I was a bit concerned that if I was to start something like this in South Africa, it might have worked in Europe, but it might not work here. Like, how am I going to design these things? How am I going to get it to the right level? How do I build this business that I actually know nothing about? So I decided to see if anybody else had done it in SA yet, and maybe try, knock on their door and see if they wanted another partner. And that's exactly what I did. I looked around. There was only one. It was the first in Africa, 2013. They opened, called HintHunt, based in Cape Town. I was living in Joburg, as I am now, and I started emailing the guy, the owner. I'm like, hey, my name's Dino. I'm from here. I'd like to find your business and open one in Joburg. And he just gave me bat. And he continued to give me bat for a long period of time until I was like, oh, well, screw this. I'm booking a ticket to Cape Town. I'm going to book a couple of games, try it out, see what it's like. And then, if I like the concept, maybe look at a franchise and bring it from somebody else. If this guy's not going to listen to me, I'll figure out somebody else who will. And the day before I flew, I get a message from him because he had seen my name come up in the booking system. He says, I'll see you tomorrow. We had a good chat. We hit it off. And then, that's where that door kind of opened to potentially start a partnership with them. If that answers the question.
It does. And it opens up a lot more questions. And the one thing that comes to mind is, so you and your mate, Rocco, you're talking through a lot of ideas. And you see this and you notice that it's fairly low startup cost. People are doing it in their garage or whatever the case may be. Why then do you decide to look to invest in another business as opposed to starting something from scratch yourself?
So there's a couple of reasons, and a lot has to do with maybe like my personality and having had a bit of a knock in confidence of, the business that I'd just come out of failing, which was a lot of it was by my own hand. Some of it was, a bit of the franchise. There's a number of reasons, but I had my shortcomings. So there was this concern, and also for Rocco, it wasn't like an area of interest, and particularly the way he wanted to do it wasn't a way that I was keen on, because I wanted to do it properly. I didn't want it to do it low cost. So I'm actually forgetting the question as I'm speaking.
Why did you look to partner with someone?
Oh, yeah. So a number of reasons, right? This is now a business that had been running in South Africa for about two years by the time I'd contacted them. So I know that Europe is different to South Africa. You can't just take something from there, replicate it here necessarily, and it's just going to work. Or I was worried that would be the case. And I didn't know enough about the business. Like I knew it was about fun, but I didn't know anything else about it. How do I make this a success? I was like pretty clueless, and I could have looked at a different franchise and brought my own my own business fully on my own and franchise from one of the European companies. But I liked this brand, and I liked the fact that they'd been in SA. There was value in that to me, and that's the real driving force behind wanting to work with them in particular and getting involved with an existing company in SA. There was a bit of a history there that made it slightly lower risk than me just taking a bunch of my own cash and starting one up, getting a lease, taking it down on my own name. Like those are big commitments.
Yeah.
Like finding a location at what point. At what point should I be looking at rentals? Nobody from Europe can tell me that because our markets are completely different. How do I price this product? Okay, cool. I could look at what he's doing in Cape Town, but yeah, there were just so many factors so many unanswered questions that I thought that this was the lower risk route if I was going to put money forward. It was also the more expensive route, but it seemed the more viable option to me for those reasons, I guess.
The other thing, which I think you've just said quite flippantly, which I find quite impressive, is, you said, I was interested in the business, so I just emailed the owner and said, listen, I'd like to invest, and open something up in Johannesburg. What's going through your mind when you're doing that? Because I won't lie, for someone like me who wants to be a self-starter, it might seem normal to you, but it's very inspirational for me because I would feel like an imposter just writing that email. Even if I have the financial backing to actually invest, I'd still fear the rejection. I'd feel the judgment. What makes it so easy for you to just be like, hey, listen, I want to invest in your business. Let's have a chat.
That was learned through experience, right? And that sounds probably more impressive than what it is. But I remember back in school, I was quite a shy kid and very low self-esteem. So those kinds of things, like knocking on somebody's door like that, would not happen for me, But I had a friend back then, and we were part of the Manchester United Supporters Club of South Africa. And
back then, it was a good supporters club to be a part of.
Then, we were part of a footballing supporters club of a once prominent football club, and there was this event where he had organized, Andy Mitten, a famous sports journalist, to do an interview. He had gotten hold of Rio Ferdinand's manager to do an interview with the club. We was like still in school, and then shortly after school, he actually was a part of these master classes, and he got like Donald Trump Jr. to be a keynote speaker. And I was like, geez, so impressed by this. And he was just like, dude, all you have to do is ask, like you just have to ask. And that always stuck with me. And I was like, the answer's not always no, like, and even if it's no, it's that's the starting point. It doesn't always mean no. So I kind of took that on board and a bit of inspiration from Bruce, and I started being a bit more open. And as I gained a bit more confidence in the real world, it became a bit easier to like knock on a door and be like, hey, listen, I've got this idea, or I'm looking at this opportunity, or could you do X, Y, and Z? And found that a lot more doors would open than shut. And through that experience, is why I brought up experiences, it made it very easy at that point to have gone like, hey guys, like, I'm interested in this idea, let's chat. And even after being rejected, like be a bit persistent and go, I know I can add value. I know there's something here. At least just hear me out. Let's meet. Let's sit down. There would have been a point at some point where you got to cut your losses and go like, okay, cool. There's no point in pursuing this. But in that case, it worked. And in most cases, I found that it worked. And I use that kind of approach to a lot of things. I mean, last year, I know we didn't want to talk about Survivor, but last year we weren't going to have a finale or COVID, what. And with 2.5 weeks to go, we found out we don't have a finale. And we kind of put this event together. I knock on a hotel's door and say, hey, listen, can we do this event there? They've got this exorbitant like fee for their venue hire. And I'm just like, well, how about you waive the fee? Just waive the fee. And they did. And then we had this like epic event, so it's things that I've carried through where it's like, if you don't ask, you're not going to get, so it's definitely worth a shot.
And has the rejection actually ever hurt as much as we tend to build it up in our mind?
No. And I suppose in this context, there's rejection is rejection, but there's many ways you can be rejected, through a romantic partner or through friend groups or through family or through, but from my side speaking in the business sense, no, not really. And I've actually found, and maybe it's the eternal optimist in me, but I found that a lot of the times no is kind of like the starting point for negotiation. And I don't read much, so I'm not going to try and sound smart here, but there is a book, Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss, he was a former FBI hostage negotiator. And one of the major premises of the book is to say that, the negotiation starts at no. That's not the end of a negotiation, it's the beginning of a negotiation. And I hadn't read this at that stage, but I think there was something in me that always saw opportunity in that and goes like, but how do we problem solve this? This no at the moment is a bit of a problem. There's a reason they're saying no. Let's find out the reasons. And if we can find solutions to the reasons, then we can turn that no into a yes. And that kind of takes the edge of that rejection off in that, knowing that, it might not be an ultimate rejection. It might be the starting point of something. And it's actually not personal. Like most of the time, at the very least in my experience, it's not personal. And I think when you start getting yeses and winning along the way, your mindset shifts to that longer term, and you think of those wins along the way. And the idea of not asking for something becomes this opportunity cost, because you're like, well, what if I don't ask and I could have now had it? And that becomes the risk, because, well, now my experience has told me that 8 out of 10 times, so yeah, I think it becomes a mindset shift after a bit of experience and a bit of confidence building. But it's definitely worth giving it a crack, right?
Yeah, that's, I mean, very, very insightful. It's something I've slowly like started figuring out, and I always try and put myself in the position of the person I'm asking. And I think, would I be offended if someone asked me what I want to ask them?
Yeah.
And literally 10 out of 10 times the answer is no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
In most instances, I'd actually be quite flattered and hate to turn them down. So what's the name of that book again? Let's just get it. I'm going to go and give that a read.
Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And you hit the nail on the head also. It's okay. So if you don't ask, the answer is it's an implicit no, because you haven't asked.
Yeah.
So you're living in a state of rejection without even thinking of it, really.
And it's such a cliche, but I think it's only a cliche because it's true.
Yeah. Now let's get back to your story with HintHunt. You send out the email. You're getting rejected at this point. You're like, it's fine. I'm going to go to Cape Town. I'm gonna see what the business has to offer, and I'm gonna find what what the points of contention are. I'm going to turn that no into a yes. So you arrive in Cape Town. What goes down?
So I arrived in Cape Town. I spoke to two friends I know that were living in Cape Town at the time. Said, "Hey, let's come try this thing out." Tried it out. Asked them their opinion on it. They were like, "Yeah, no, it's quite cool. Whatever." And then I sat with Steve, who was the operating partner at that time. Afterwards, and we just had a bit of a chat, and we just kind of hit it off, And I think by being personable, and I think there was actually something that was a turning point as well. I think in his perception of me was during this process when I was getting a few no's from him. I went to the main franchisor, although their business was based in London, they operated out of their head office was in Budapest. And I spoke to them and said, "Hey, listen, I want to start this thing in Joburg." And they started, negotiating, terms with me for a Joburg branch. And I ended up opening up to Steve about that and saying, "Listen, by the way, I know, I've come here on good faith and I'm speaking to this. I just want to let you know that these are the discussions I'm having with the franchisor main, And he was like, "Oh my word, that actually, that goes against our current franchise agreement." Or, I mean, there were loopholes and stuff that they were working, but just by coming forward, and breaking down those barriers and being a bit transparent, and I suppose showing him a bit of who I am, that helped, maybe shift his mindset as to this outside investor who's coming with maybe potential money to inject into the business to open a new branch. Like, what is my, I don't know, what are my ethics, or do we even align, in terms of how we deal with people? I don't know. There were millions of questions that were probably going through his head, or millions of reasons why to reject me. But through that transparency and sincerity, I think that's what really changed. That's what really, shifted his mindset from, no, we're not taking any outsiders, to, hey, this kid's worth taking back to our partners and seeing if we want to expand with him, So yeah, and I've always believed in that, right? In the human element, in the relationship side of things. I'm big on all type, all relationships, personal relationships, business relationships, and for me, like, a key factor is transparency and honesty, right? To have any successful relationship, if your goal is to nurture a relationship, I believe that transparency, honesty, is absolutely key, because that builds trust, and that forms a foundation for any relationship. And I think starting at that and being able to be personable and connect with him on that level, that opened that door that was once closed.
And tell me, so you have this chat. He's now impressed by you, and I don't blame him. You're an impressive character.
Hardly. We'll get to that impressive stuff.
Yeah. How does it then go into you actually investing? And after, or with that question, how much due diligence beyond the fact that you enjoyed your experience at HintHunt did you do before putting your money on the table?
So, man, like, the downside of being a relationship guy and being a trust guy is that, I'll trust you until you kind of give me 15, 20 reasons to distrust you, So, from there, I then had chats with the other silent shareholders in the business. We kind of had like discussions, and then they put a valuation on, instead of just opening up a Joburg branch, I was going to buy into the entire business. We were going to use those funds to open up the Joburg branch and expand in the Cape Town branch. And they put a value on that based on whatever it was they put the value on. And in terms of due diligence, well, this is where I wished I was more academic. I looked at a couple of numbers. It wasn't audited financials. It was just like basic. What I was really looking at now is a cash flow statement more than anything else, I suppose. I don't even know if that's what it was, but that's how I kind of recollected. And I didn't venture beyond that. I kind of took it at face value, and also displayed a whole lot of trust that this was going to be a fair value. And, truth be told, although I'm happy where I'm at now, I mean, going back, I probably paid 3 times more than what I should have at that stage. If I'd done proper due diligence and understood a bit about the accounting side of things and how to value a business and what to look out for, chances are I actually wouldn't have invested, because I would never have gotten I would never have, I would never have paid what I paid for it, and they wouldn't have taken anything less, or they might have taken marginally less, but it wouldn't have been worthwhile to me if I just got bogged down by the numbers. So, although it was an unfavorable decision at that stage that I only learned way down the line that I was kind of like, well, overcharged. It's worked out for the better now because I'm in this position. But that's a hard lesson that I've taken now is a bit of due diligence and taking care, like, and not just taking things at face value and exploring it further. And that's where, I might have had this like life experience side of things, and I was involved in businesses, but those were some of those fundamental things that I feel like I lacked in formal education or working for somebody who could have guided me through those processes. So yeah, definitely a hard lesson to learn, but one that I'm glad I learned, and I'm I've come out the other side with feeling content.
Having overpaid and looking back at it now, what are the critical elements that you wish you had applied, or the things you wish you had known in that process, with the benefit of hindsight?
It's so funny because there's greater reasons to this, but I think having been a bit more assertive, right? So this speaks more to a character trait than looking at elements of a business. But if I had been a bit more assertive of myself and not felt like such an imposter, so even though yes, I knocked on the doors, there's that imposter syndrome. I was this young guy, I was chatting to 40-something-year-olds who were best friends for like the longest time. Who am I to now come in and start demanding things from their business, like audited financials? So I think being assertive, and attaining for me to be audited financials, because the reality is there were two things I would have picked up at that stage. One, that the valuation was ridiculous, and two, an operational partner at that stage was actually stealing, and he did end up stealing from us for a very, very long time, and that brought us to our knees, to a liquidation, to a whole rehashing of things, and we pretty much we came so close to nearly losing absolutely everything. We eventually figured it out later on. So yeah, due diligence just as a whole, as a principle, is something I now value that I didn't really value before.
Sure. And I want us to go down to the route of the liquidation and all of that. But before we get there, talk to us about, you've bought into the business. What percentage did you buy? Can you share that with us at that point?
So at that stage, there were 3 shareholders, and I bought a quarter essentially. So then everyone diluted down to 25%.
Okay, so there were 4 of you.
Yeah.
After you bought in, when you bought in, obviously you don't know that you've overpaid. You're euphoric that you've got into this business. What at that point? What are your hopes and dreams for HintHunt South Africa? If you back then, what were you envisioning as being your 10 years out? What would the success story be?
I didn't think 10 years at a time at that stage of my life. I was just thinking like 2, 3, 4 years at a time. And in my world, when embarking on this journey, I figured that I was going to stay in the tobacco industry, kind of half it there, start this business, run both, get the best of both worlds. When in actual fact, there were other reasons, but I eventually canned the idea of I actually completely walked away from the tobacco industry altogether. And then I just literally put all my eggs in this basket and was like, cool. Based on what I'd seen, I was like, cool. In 3 to 5 years, I've quadrupled my money here. And we've opened multiple locations. We've opened Durban, we've opened Bloemfontein, we've opened PE. At that stage, it was still PE. We've opened Pretoria, and we're going through Africa. That I was like, that's what's going to happen, and that was my belief. That didn't quite happen that way.
Yeah, well, 2 things happened. One was, I guess, shady business dealings, and the other being COVID. So maybe let's start with, what happened with one of your business partners and the liquidation. What was the story behind that?
So look, essentially, again, there was still that trust element that ran through from my side, and that lack of assertiveness. So even though I'd picked up on some red flags, I never brought it forward, because at the same time I was like, well, I'm outnumbered. These are 3 mates. This is their mate. Even if I said something, like, it puts me in a weird position. And again, who am I? This youngster, Eventually gets to the stage where out of nowhere we find out we're in this like huge financial trouble. I kind of operated more as like a manager than anything else. I didn't assert myself to any high level. I didn't really look at the financials. I didn't get into the accounts. I didn't question transactions. I didn't, I just I really operated as like a glorified manager, if I'm honest, at that stage, with the shareholding. And then out of nowhere, we get hit with this figure that, we owe SARS, we owe landlords, we owe head office, the franchisor, we owe literal millions, and we're like, how did this happen all of a sudden? We were all caught off guard, right? And we're just like, okay, cool. A lot of it was blamed on the underperformance of the Johannesburg branch and stuff like that, and whatever. We just go into like crisis mode, and how do we save this business? And we go through this whole process, and we find a way out. Shortly after that, in the revival stages, our one shareholder, Gary, who's an astute businessman, MBA, but also School of Life before MBA, super successful in his own right and having built a multi-million euro company. He kept a close eye on the numbers, and he kind of worked with me to show me how to do that, through a simple spreadsheet, nothing formal, very simple. And I was like, okay, cool. And through keeping an eye on that spreadsheet, we started seeing the same red flags. And I kind of went to Gary. I was like, hey, dude, like, do you see this red flag? He's like, yeah, I've also noticed these things. He didn't want to say anything to me because he thought I was in the other partner's corner, and I didn't want to say anything to him because they've been mates for like 20 years. And then I launched this like full-on investigation where I went through literally every transaction on the bank statement for, at that stage, 6 years of the business. And in doing that entire exercise, I kind of saw where all our money had been moved to and how we ended up in that situation. I presented it back to our partner Gary, and then we took action. And that was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my entire life. I mean, our partner worked for the business, his wife worked for the business, they had 2 young kids. This was something that he had built. He was the one that kind of brought the concept to them to invest in initially, and this was something like his baby that he'd built. And this was this is what they relied on for income. And I had to suspend him, and then we followed through with the investigation, and eventually he resigned and he handed over his shareholding and whatnot. And even though he was in the wrong, I mean, on a personal level, that was really hard to do to somebody who I got incredibly close with. It was to say like, hey, but you're suspended, you're now out of a job, essentially. This is the next thing. We've hit you with all of this. Like, we found all this theft. Yes, you're in the wrong, but right now your world sucks. Like, that is incredibly hard to do to a person, no matter, or at least for me, no matter how much wrong they've done. So yeah, that was another lesson in having to make the hard decisions, because at the end of the day, by not doing that, yeah, cool, I could let myself, bear the brunt of it, and I can always say, well, I'll figure it out. But our staff were suffering. That business closed down. A lot of people lost their jobs, so including our partner and his wife anyway. So for me, it was like, well, who do I need to be accountable to? And I was like, I need to be accountable to the business, and the business, the people who depend on that business. And I had to make that hard decision and take that hard course of action. So sorry, I've gone a bit further into it,
No,
but
that's great.
I mean, it's not all sunshine and roses. No matter how much passion you have for a business, or how much it resonates with you and how much joy it brings you, it's still a business at the end of the day. And that comes with the hard admin, the hard looking at the business, hard looking at oneself, and coming to terms with hard decisions that you have to make and execute. It's not fun, it's not easy, but that's often necessary. And I think at times those are like the make or breaks, and can be the make or break points. And it's definitely something I've learned a lot from.
And 2 things. So the first one being, how do you, as a 20-something-year-old, obviously feeling almost like, feeling like an imposter with your 3 business partners, all significantly older than you, all have pre-existing relationships that span years.
Yeah.
How do you find the confidence to start speaking up? Is it only because of what happened? If this hadn't happened in the business, do you think you'd still be a lot quieter and feel a lot less than your business partners? So that's one question. And the second question being, what are some of those red flags? Like, if someone's in a partnership, and if someone's listening and they have their own suspicions, or whatever the case may be, what would your advice be in terms of what you need to look out for?
So to answer the first question is, I'm not sure. So the confidence came because I had one of the partner's backings, and that partner was an astute businessman that I learned to trust. And I actually worked closely together with him on that whole investigation, and then having to make the decisions we had to make. I had his full support, so that gave confidence. I don't know what the alternative would have looked like or felt like, or how that would have panned out. So I can't answer that.
Do you fear disappointing people?
Oh, big time.
Okay, because what you're saying resonates a lot with me, and I'm very similar in the sense that a lot of the time I keep quiet because I don't want to say something and disappoint someone, and even at work, like as a strategy consultant, it's you feel like an imposter every day when you sit in front of a CEO who literally has more industry experience than you've been alive.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing I can say that you don't know, and but I have to live and breathe this. I guess I have to be this being that I know how to help you.
Yeah.
And it was only once I got a boss who made it, who gave me a nurturing space where it was like, it's okay. I don't expect you to know all the answers. That's not why we hired you. You're very good at what you do, and you'll build into that character.
Yeah.
For now, it's okay not to know everything. And once that I had that understanding, and I knew that it's almost like having a fatherly figure who's like,
yeah.
I'm proud of you. I won't be disappointed if you make a mistake, because we all make mistakes. It was the most liberating feeling. And I, much like you, working a 9 to 5, I don't work for a company. I work for my boss, sort of thing. So it's like, I don't care about the company. I care about the people I work for. And you can get a lot of confidence, and you can learn a lot just by being in the right environment. So it's amazing to hear. It's not something you would ascribe to an entrepreneur almost feeling an imposter in their own business. But I think it is such a prevalent issue with people who start things and are building things from scratch. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
No,
tell us about.
It's a fair point, and I mean it's one that obviously resonates with me because I mean, like I said, I suppose it depends on your personality type. For me, I'm a relationship person. I'm an empath, and for me, it's all about relationships. So the fear of disappointing someone is up there with like some of the greatest fears. So but I think through healthy relationships you can get past that, like you'd experienced. To answer the second question was, remind me.
It was, so how do you identify red flags? So if you're worried about misappropriation of funds or unsavory business practice, what are some of the things that someone could look out for?
So some of these are dead obvious, and they weren't red flags. I don't know what you want to call them. They were way bigger than red flags. But
gunshots to the head.
Literally. I mean, it got to a stage where, I'd done well for myself prior to this, and I was going long periods of time without drawing a salary and justifying it, saying like, oh, you know what, it's for the good of the business. We're going to build it back up, and other partners feeling it the same. I was putting staff salaries on my credit card. So those are never good things to be having to do in the business, but I always found a way to justify why it was happening, right? And so would he. But not having that transparency back, everything being closed off, not being able to like really question anything of the finances, not getting a straight answer, always getting a story that didn't make sense, like my gut in general was just like screaming, yelling at me, going like, this is bad, but I ignored the gut. The constant, we'd have a bookkeeper, and then that bookkeeper would magically disappear after like 4 months, and then we'd need then his wife was doing the books again, and and not that I got close looks at these things, but it was a lot of big things, and then a lot of little things as well. And even the treatment of staff, or the staff getting concerned, because then there was, we literally hit a stage where we couldn't actually pay our staff their full salaries, and they were only finding this out like the day before salaries were due. And I'm like, that's not how you deal with people. That's not how you manage expectations. These are people that have lives to live. You've got to manage them better and consider them better. And then I started seeing, it wasn't from a business sense, it was from a personality sense, where there's, elements of narcissism coming in, and that lack of respect and consideration for everyone around started coming through stronger and stronger in those times. And I was like, okay, cool, no, this is bad, and we actually caught it, or looked at it way too late. The ship was sinking. We very fortunately found a way to revive it, but it should never have gotten to that stage. And had I been a bit more assertive and trusted my intuition a bit, and which I had every right to do. I was a shareholder in this business. I had hard-earned money. I had time spent in this business. I had every right to be like, hey, well, what's actually going on here? Why? I deserve to know the why. I deserve to be exposed to. I have every right to be exposed to the financials, for example. And even if they don't make sense to me, I should be able to have access to them so that I can take it to somebody who does understand them and can tell me, like what to look out for, So yeah, I mean, those are like mini red flags. I mean, it got really bad at the end when the guy's building a house, allegedly on father-in-law money in Knysna, while I'm busy selling off my assets. Literally sold off 2 apartments, sold my car, put things on my credit card, had sickening debt on my credit card by that stage to keep this business afloat. And then it became apparent that I wasn't keeping the business afloat, I was keeping his lifestyle afloat, so yeah, I mean, it was devastating. It's something that I'm still recovering from, but luckily I can say that I am recovering from it. But yeah, it was pretty devastating at the time. I'm not gonna lie.
And when did this happen? When did all of this go down and you uncovered and you guys asked the partner to walk away?
22nd of November 2019, I served his notice of suspension. I'd been working on that whole, let's call it the internal investigation, for 5 months at that time, and we had a plan of action because it was very complicated to suspend him because of the way everything was set up in his own name, and he had access to everything, and pretty much it was very complicated to suspend him and still have an operational business. And yeah, shortly after that, with the support of Gary, our other partner, who became a bit more actively involved in just advising me and guiding me on the business and supporting me, things turned very, very quickly, very quickly. The business always performed well from a sales perspective. There were always sales. There was just no money left over, and for some reason it wasn't reaching the people it needed to reach. So it turned very, very quickly, and it was super exciting. And like I say, that was November 2019, and what comes after November 2019?
it was a good 4 months.
March 2020, which was the beginning of COVID, which was absolutely devastating actually at the time, and it meant another good few months of absolute hardship. But yeah, I mean, that's another story.
And so when did you, I just want to get the timeline. So when did you invest? What was the date that the investment went through? You're a 25% shareholder?
November 2015, and then we opened the Johannesburg branch in April 2016.
And then 22nd November 2019 is when there were only 3 partners left in the business.
Correct.
When were the red flags like coming out through the woodwork? Like you wouldn't believe. Which year was that?
So the latter end of 2018, and then the bulk of 2019.
So you went through almost a period of a year and a half of torture, by what it sounds like, or just
So that was like when it was in the face, and sure, yeah. I mean, 2018 it was the end of 2018 where we pretty much nearly lost everything. Then investigation kind of started early 2019 because the first priority was save the business, and then we dealt with him afterwards. So yeah, I mean that was a long time, but I mean in the build up, pretty much from 2016, I already started. I mean, I'd invested everything I'd at that stage in this business. I'd walked away completely from my revenue stream that helped me build up that capital. It was substantial for a 25-year-old at the time. I think it was substantial. And from that point in time, I ended up just selling off assets, incurring debt. And so 2016 onwards, it was slow trauma I hadn't really realized, but it became incredibly apparent and had huge effects on my life and all years of my life from about halfway through 2018 onwards.
And I mean, this is, I think, a fear that most people have, and it's what I think a majority of people will cite as the reason why they'd rather have a 9 to 5 than get into business. It's that fear of putting everything on the line and losing it. And in your case, you put everything on the line in terms of your life savings. You lost that, and then you started putting all your assets up also. So you lost twice as hard.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how Dino was feeling in that time. Was it just a bundle of regret, and it's like, I hate the fact that I put myself in this position. I have no other option but to get myself out, but I wish I wasn't here. Was that the feeling? Was it?
Yeah, look, I felt like an idiot. I'm like, you knew better. Your gut, like, you could have stopped this from getting to this point. It didn't have to get you. It didn't have to be this way, and you could have done a lot more. So there was a bit of that, like, self scolding in a way, and just being like really, really upset with myself. But that didn't take up most of my focus, because that didn't actually serve getting out of the situation, And the reality was, I still believed in the business, still firmly believed. I knew there was something there. I always knew, like that never left me. Like, even when things weren't working, I was like, but this thing can work. It's there's just something that we haven't put up and on, that's why it's not quite reaching the heights it needs to reach. I always knew it would work. There was always something to be made from it, right? So that's what like kept me going at the very least, and that's what I ended up focusing on. So yeah, I mean, not fun to have that experience of like, you're here by your own hand. Can't blame the world, can't blame him. Like, if you were assertive and you know, I'm accountable to my own actions, and I've got to be accountable. I can't put the blame firmly on him. Yes, he did something bad, but I was lazy, or I wasn't assertive, or I don't know, whatever you want to say it was, but by my actions, it led us to where we were just as much, or my lack of action even. So there was another lesson, and that's something that I firmly believe is, there's always going to be these external factors that impact your ability to turn something around, or to grow, or might have a negative effect on you or your business. But the reality is, like, we can't get bogged down and just blame everything else. We can't blame circumstances. We got to look at ourselves, or that's what I learned at least, to look at myself and go like, well, where's your what are you accountable for, actually? Really, not excuses, like really hard look and be dead honest. Like, where did you actually screw up? How could you have been better in this and prevented this from happening? And there were a lot of ways that I could have, So as much as, like I say, somebody did something bad, it was still my own fault, or I didn't do much to make it better at that stage. So yeah, hard lessons, but good lessons.
Tell me, once all the issues with your partner had been resolved, you have 4 months of, I guess, great business before COVID hits. What were your thoughts going into the COVID period, the pandemic? Did you think it was going to be 3 weeks of no business and then everything gets back to normal, or?
No, I didn't ever think it was going to be that short a period. Didn't make sense. But I also didn't foresee how long and how much of an impact it would have. So yeah, I mean, we go through this terrible time, and then we start seeing this freaking light, and it's amazing, and we're excited, and I've got this incredible support from Gary, and he's looking at joining the business full time at this stage, to help take it to the next level. And COVID hits, and it's pretty devastating. It's like, I mean, it was super hard, because nobody knew what was really to come. Again, like, Gary's great, and this goes back to the relationship thing, is we started preempting a whole lot of stuff the month prior to having to close, right? Because we only shut down, I think it was the 23rd of March, and I think government was at like 28th of March or something like that. So we had preempted, and prior to that, well in advance, we started communicating with like suppliers and mainly our landlords, going, hey guys, there's this COVID thing out there. These are the likely scenarios that we face, where either we're just not going to be allowed to trade, we're going to see reduced trading volumes, you guys might have to shut down completely, and that's why we can't trade. Like, there's so many scenarios. We kind of did 3 possible scenarios, and we said, what happens at that point? What does this mean for our lease? What does this mean for payments? Because obviously we can't trade. We need clarity on what happens. So we preempted all of this and started having discussions. And this is a story of 2 landlords. We had 2 locations, Old Biscuit Mill and V&A Waterfront. Old Biscuit Mill, we heard nothing back from. Sorry to name and shame, but we had nothing back from them, and it went dead. V&A Waterfront constantly communicated back and forth with us, admitting that it's uncharted territory, we don't know, but we'll have landlord support. We're a small business. We're in the V&A watershed. We're in the watershed, which basically incubates and is there to grow small businesses. And they said small businesses will have their full support. Heard nothing from Old Biscuit Mill. So there's a lot going on. It's the one side is the emotional side, which is, oh my word, do I just attract this now? Am I just attracting devastation? It's like, don't be silly. You're insignificant. You didn't attract COVID to the world. Like, it's not your fault. Like, there's no ways it's your fault. Like, you're not
There is
important.
a bat somewhere in China that is determined to take out its revenge on you.
On me. So the emotional side of that was quite challenging on a personal level. Like, what's wrong with me? You know, why does this keep happening? You know, but also, you know, the weight of carrying staff who have been through so much. You know, and I feel, you know, I owe it to them, and we owe it to them to give the best to the business to ensure that, you know, their jobs are secure, their income is secure. People rely on this. You know, I take that very seriously, and it's a great part of being an entrepreneur is being able to create jobs and especially my industry, to create jobs that are fun and people can enjoy being a part of. You know, and I feel very responsible for ensuring that that is safe. You know, and that because people rely on that. You know, it's livelihoods. It has this massive ripple effect. So that emotional toll was also quite challenging to go. Like, we've just gone through this immense period of disappointment and uncertainty. We've cleaned everything up. We're seeing the light. We've just guaranteed all the certainty and said, no, you guys don't have to worry about this again. We're at the helm now. This is how things are. Now COVID hits and you've got to go back to things uncertain. Yes, given those things were way out of our hands, but that still sits and weighs really, really heavily. Along with, like, do we make it out? Are we going to have a business at the end of this? You know, like, that was my revenue stream as it was, or my income as much as it was a lot of other people's income. That was cut again, you know. That has impacts on me personally and my you know, my relationships or whatever the case may be. So there's I went through what most of the world went through at that point in time, which was immense stress, uncertainty, and yeah, it was scary. But fortunately, you know, and this is a great thing about having such a great business partner as well. There was a proactive approach, right? Like I said, we already started preempting certain things, and you know, which helped us with, you know, the V&A Waterfront in particular, with our relationship with them, showing that we were proactive and looking at contingencies and considering them and considering outcomes and being completely transparent, right? That stood us in really good stead going forward. So there was a lot to say that even though the situation was bad, there was a lot we could do to at least make it less bad and give ourselves the best chance at survival. Because yes, we absolutely went into survival mode, and that's not a fun place to be, but it's a hell of a lot better than being in, well, it's completely closed, there is no more, what's next, you know? Because it was definitely worth saving. And, you know, through, again, daily chats now with my partner then of like, how do we get through this? Because we don't know what the next month holds. You know, it's 6 weeks, then it's 9 weeks. We applied for TERS, you know, so that our staff could get some sort of remuneration, because we'd come out of such a bad space. We didn't have any
Excess
cash reserves to be able to carry any salaries. Like, no one, nothing. We literally, our bank account zeroed, literally zeroed once you'd paid out like final payments, which is a scary place to be for a business, you know. And yeah, so we then chatted daily on a daily basis on like, okay, cool, what does this mean? How do we minimize our risks? We were just investigating like, you know, all the relief schemes, all the support systems, all the financing options, you know, that were out there for small businesses, and we investigated all of those, and none of them were applicable to us, so we didn't get any sort of you know, respite there. But we looked, that was the thing, you know, and we looked closely rather than just going like, well, this is a bad thing that's happened to us, just, you know, it's happening to everyone, there's nothing we can do. We actively went out and looked for what can we do to improve the situation. And as time went on, we did fall out with Old Biscuit Mill landlord. They were incredibly difficult, completely unreasonable. I know it's easy for me to say here from our perspective, but they ended up losing a lot of tenants because of that, you know. So we lost a location and all our investment in that location, essentially, you know, which was pretty devastating. But by the same token, on the other hand, we've got this incredible landlord supporting us on full relief because we're not trading. constant communication, looking at ways to work together, giving us resources to look at, to potentially tide our business over, incredible support, um, and I mean, as the months ticked on, it became evident that we wouldn't be able to trade, even though certain sectors opened. We were like entertainment. We were one of the last people to be able to open again. Got to a stage where we had to retrench our employees. We actually retrenched employees, which was incredibly hard because tours had come to an end, and at that point we'd have to retrench. But in that time, we started looking at what our other options were, and something that came of it was we had a really good look at how we could streamline our business going forward. Because should we come out the other side and start trading again, we needed to ensure that our costs were as low as they possibly could be, and our business was as efficient as it could be to get as much out of it as possible to give us the best chance at reviving it. So it gave us a lot of time to look at that and plan around that in a very theoretical point, because we didn't know if we were ever going to open again. The other thing was, how do we now adapt and start offering other experiences? So we did what a lot of escape rooms did, and we went online. We started creating online experiences to offer to our corporate clients, who used to form a big part of our business, and say, like, let's not do the traditional quizzes, let's not do the traditional whatever team builds you're now doing online. Corporates were really struggling to connect with their teams because everyone was working from home and re-engage. So that was our opportunity to say, well, here's a product, we'll facilitate these experiences online. It mimics an escape room, just in an online environment.
How quickly into lockdown did you guys come up with your virtual experiences?
So it was about a month into lockdown that we were like, okay, this is what we need to do. And we had two approaches, and we actually wasted a lot of time trying to develop the perfect product for our client. And we ended up going to market with two other products that were far less refined than what we were working on. We canned those 3 months, which was painful. And we went to market with slightly simpler products that actually suited our clients better. So, I mean, all in all, it was about 4 months before we started actually offering online experiences. 4 months from when lockdown happened,
and I'll take your words from it. I don't want to give it a summary, but what are your lessons learned from that?
I think it's adapt or die, really, right? And I think by nature, humans are adaptable. I think we're incredibly adaptable, and our businesses should be that too, right? And we had to look for the opportunity. So in times of crisis, there's always an opportunity. Somebody's going to win. And I'm not saying we came out there winning big, but we looked for the opportunity. And the opportunity, well, people weren't connecting. We found a way to help them reconnect. We were solving a problem. Now, it didn't catapult us back to where we were before, but it gave us a stream of revenue that gave us a bit of a kickstart when we could reopen our doors.
How close to your previous revenue were you guys getting through these virtual experiences?
So I'd say 10 to 15% of what we would have done as turnover, we were able to do as virtual. Bearing in mind, virtual was never a facet of our business prior. So I mean, that brings us to like a really cool point, and this is the opportunity side of it, is that we learned a lot through this COVID, and we kept and we still do keep an incredibly close eye on the numbers. Gary's always by nature known where every cent in a business goes, and I now know where every cent goes. We keep a very, very close eye on that. But we also did what we set out to do, which was refine and streamline our business, which was fantastic. And on top of that, we started offering more experiences than we had before. Our portfolio of products and experiences that we started offering to clients, we now had more to give, which meant in the long term, more revenue or more revenue streams, depending on how well we nurtured each of those aspects of the business. We heavily I'd say we heavily invested time in our amazing races, because those are outdoor events. So when we did get to start training again, that was the go-to, because we could say, well, this is outdoors. You don't have to be locked in a room if you don't want to be. We offer these outdoor experiences. It gives you that happy medium. And we really grew that part of our business, which was before just like an add-on that we looked at as merely an add-on. Now we looked at it as a serious part of our business. Same with the online portion, hitting up all our old corporate clientele who weren't doing these team buildings. Well, even though we could trade still, not everyone was back in the office. It was an additional revenue stream we didn't have before. And then
So as conditions look to normalize now, as we're heading towards hopefully the permanent removal of lockdown and COVID restrictions, what percentage of your business do you think, or what's your target for these new revenue streams?
I'm going to throw some numbers out there, and I hope they all make sense, right? So prior to lockdown, 50% of our business was corporate and corporate functions, team builds, okay? And we include catering, and because we had facilities to cater and all that as well. 25% of our business was tourism, both local and international tourism. The last 25% of our business was the local Cape Town market.
Just walk-in customers.
At that stage, we had 2 locations, Old Biscuit Mill, 4 game rooms, and V&A Waterfront, 7 game rooms. Okay, I'm telling you this because it's really important. This is going to blow your mind, right? This gets me really excited. We closed Old Biscuit Mill down. We had to close 2 other rooms down. We only had 5 game rooms operating out of 11. Okay, and still only have 5 game rooms operating out of 11. So our business is technically half the size. Okay, cool. We've got a few add-ons in Amazing Race and virtual, which make up a small portion. Since that, October, November, December, 2021 now. Yeah. This just passed, coming out of COVID still. We were managing to trade at 85 to 90% of what our levels were in 2019, which were our best ever months. With a business that was half the size, okay? March, that's just passed, it was our 5th best month we've ever done in the history of HintHunt, and March is traditionally like our 3rd slowest month. So our business has technically grown. If you look at what's left of it, right? Our business has actually grown, and there's still huge room to grow. And I think,
in that month March, what was it? Majority physical or virtual experiences?
No, majority on site. Our virtual experiences now have gone back to make up a very, very small portion of our revenue, but still one that we respect. But it's on site. It's the Amazing Race and predominantly our escape rooms. And we put that down to a lot of the hard work that has been put in last year. We've invested heavily in marketing and making ourselves more appealing to our locals, because we had to make up for the tourists that went there. We had to make up for the businesses that were coming in. We started targeting the smaller businesses for team builds because they were less stringent than your bigger corporates, bigger corporates who made up a massive portion of our business. And that's how we started getting some corporate business back, just in smaller teams, whereas we'd do groups of between 30 and 100 before from a company. We're now doing these smaller companies that are bringing 6 to 12 people at a time, because they didn't have those barriers to entry, or to coming back to do a team building. They didn't have the red tape. So we focused a lot on those areas and marketing those areas and driving a business in that direction, that we drove that footfall through our doors, and I think I owe a lot of that to Gary and to the team behind it. Brittany, who does our marketing. We've worked really, really well as a collective, and it was through that hard, painstaking work through the really, really crappy times that we started getting rebuilding a new foundation that's actually going to let us grow to a level that we wouldn't have grown had COVID not happened. And that's kind of where that whole opportunity in a time of crisis kind of like really resonates with me now, because chances are in 5 years time our business is now going to be bigger than what it would have been had COVID never happened. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that, and I'm really positive. There's still a lot of unknowns, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we hope we continue to show the growth that we're showing. We've got really cool expansion plans that we're super, super excited about, and that we can now like roll out because we've been able to recover somewhat. But there is still this like uncertainty that sits at the back of the mind, but we can't be bogged down by that.
And the experience you guys have gone through with the COVID, with the past with your partner, does it make you wary or nervous? Does it make you feel like you're battle hardened? And is there a sense of internal confidence that we can take on pretty much anything if we've weathered the storms that we have? if we know that as a team, if we put our head down, we can figure almost anything out.
Yeah, absolutely. That confidence comes from a number of places, right? It comes from having the confidence in who I'm working with, which is my partner, having confidence in his ability, him having confidence in me, having confidence in the team that's with us and that we've been able to bring back on board, which is great to be able to bring more staff back on board. And then it's also the confidence in the relationships we have with people like our landlords, knowing that they were there for us in a massive way, and we've more than returned the favor. We've shown how we've pulled through, and we worked hand in hand with them to recover and to we also understood and respected that they went through a hard time. They couldn't just give. So we held up our end of the deal. So, who knows what kind of hardships we could possibly face. The world keeps throwing these random curveballs that you just can't plan for. But I mean, those relationships and those experiences do give a sense of confidence. We don't have to we don't have to go through it again. It would be really, really, really tiring. It has been tiring. But yeah, there's a sense of confidence that's come with it.
And a key theme that's come out of our conversation is just the influence of partners.
Yeah.
Whether it's Rocco spitballing ideas with you, or I guess on the opposite end of the spectrum, partners doing nefarious deeds and impacting the business. It seems like you've settled into a good spot with Gary, your current partner. For anyone who is disinclined, to go into a venture with someone, what would you say are the benefits? What are the? It sounds like you've learned a lot from having Gary by your side, and what are what would you tell someone who is uncertain? What are the benefits? What have you gotten out of that relationship?
It's crazy, right? And I suppose it depends on who you are and how you're wired, right? But for somebody like me who wasn't necessarily a self-starter by definition, who is the procrastinator, who lacks the self-discipline and has shown to lack self-discipline, who can be quite lazy at times, admittedly, not great character traits, but these are things that I'm faced with. For somebody like me to have a solid partner that I work with, I can be accountable to somebody other than me. Nobody wants to work for a boss. I'm not working for a boss, but I have a business partner that holds me to account. And I hold him to account. Or and that works really, really well for us, because then we start getting the best out of ourselves and the best out of each other. And it's great because going through that COVID time, a time of crisis like that, and having that person to bounce that off constantly, you're not alone. You don't have to face this battle alone. My low days, he picked me up, and his low days, I picked him up, and we ran with it. And I mean, it was incredible. So a good partnership where you're both bringing something, where you're both bringing and adding value. It's invaluable. I suppose it's like a relationship in life, or a romantic relationship, and having a good partner in that sense. I think they're built on very, very similar foundations, and I think for a personality like mine, and I think for a lot of people, having a different perspective is hugely valuable. Having a different set of skills is hugely valuable. Having a different levels of experience is hugely valuable. Gary and I don't see things the same way all the time. We see things very differently. We come from different backgrounds. I'm the fun people person. He's the serious business numbers guy. And we have differing views on things and how we should approach things, but we always come down to some sort of agreement, and then we enforce that in full force and full support. So it's great to challenge each other in that ways and challenge ideals. I've now learned a lot from him as a result, and from his experience, and I've grown as a result, and he's learned a lot from me as a result as well. So a healthy partnership is really incredible on both a personal level, and it has huge potential for a business. It really can make the biggest difference.
What happened to your third partner? Is he still in the
So,
picture?
so the third partner, he's very silent as a partner. He lives abroad. He's been the most silent shareholder of silent shareholders. And he's just got massive and full trust in Gary and I at this stage. So I mean, he's still around. That's the story for another day. And but yeah, he's a fantastic guy. But I mean, he's got a different life, different priorities, and yeah, his role is just a shareholding at this stage.
Now, Dina, I know you don't like this question, but gun to your head. Metaphorical gun. You guys can't see. There's no actual.
We're
gun.
on Joburg, but yeah.
You can choose the time horizon, 5 or 10 years. What's the vision for HintHunt? What does it look like?
Oh, dude. So, I mean, what's gone from we want to open up multiple HintHunts around the country because that's how we get big. Like, it's now become actually we want to focus on our brick and mortar business in the VNA because that's where opportunity is for us. But we want to expand. We want to be at the end of this year, 10 game room operation. In the next 2 to 3 years, 14 to 15 game room operation. We want to expand on our outdoor experiences, our outdoor escape games. But we're also looking to bring in new immersive experiences from abroad. We want to diversify. So, we no longer see ourselves as an escape room business. We see ourselves as an immersive experience business, and we're going to go look for really fun, cool concepts that we think that the South African market's going to love and enjoy, and hopefully they're viable propositions. So, yeah, I mean, outside of that, we want to. So it sounds like a lot, but there's a couple of avenues we want to explore. We want to develop we're in the process of developing software where we can gamify specific areas of events and product activations as well. So that's a big area of our business, and we see a big future in that as well. So at the moment, we are kind of assessing what's the most attainable and gives us the best return in the shortest period of time, because that's what we need, the business needs at this stage. But yeah, long term, we're going to be this epic business that has the most epic immersive experiences. 5 years from now, HintHunt's not going to just be escape rooms. It's going to be a whole wide range of things that you can entertain yourself with every day of the week. And I suppose that would feel like success if we can grow into those areas. I don't know if that gives you a good answer. It doesn't put a number or value. It doesn't give a
we don't here on the Self Starters we don't want a number or value. We want an idea, and we want to see how you put it into action.
Yeah. So if you want to hold me to it, 14 escape room games in that location, as well as 2 or 3 other immersive experiences that I've got my eye on that I'm super excited about. Super excited.
And talk to me just on a practical level. How do you manage to do this within a franchise agreement?
Oh, we were looking for independence from our franchisor for quite some time, to the point where we were actually going to exit our agreement with them and then change our name, even though we'd built up a following as HintHunt. However, because of COVID, they ended up having to close down, and all of the franchisees that survived actually become independent. So we became independent. We got our wish, which is sad to say, but I mean, we were looking at parting ways well before that anyway.
You guys needed one win over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's sad that it comes at somebody else's expense.
That's true.
But there's also reasons why they didn't survive, I suppose. But so we're completely independent at this stage, and we're going to take our business to be as big as we possibly can.
And last question before we turn the lens onto you more specifically. I think something that people struggle when they've turned this awesome idea into something, they've created something from scratch. It's not that having a good idea, having an excellent product is not good enough, and doesn't necessarily guarantee success.
Yeah.
One of the big things that you require is actually a big marketing push.
Yeah.
What advice do you have on that? Because your business is the type that is heavily reliant on marketing. I mean, I can imagine that you try and get returnee customers, but it is quite tough. You also need to get quite a lot of new customers through the door, because for most people it's a cool once-off experience. So how have you guys built your marketing to continue to find new customers? I think it's something that most people take for granted.
So our manager, she's been phenomenal on an operation level for years. She's incredible. She's got a keen interest in, or had a keen interest in, marketing. So it made sense to upskill her in that area, in an area she enjoyed, to a point where she could do our general social media posts and content creation around that. And we invested heavily. We do utilize an agency who does the analytics behind social media and targeted campaigns and whatnot. So that is a paid for service that does, obviously feel like we're spending a lot of money, but we're seeing a return on it. So that's great. We've to answer your question, we've diversified our marketing. Really, we're going through all avenues. We're going through this agency. We're going through online publications. Paid for space. We're trying to hit every avenue of marketing we can that's within our so-called budget. And Gary, being a numbers guy, he always looks at a return on investment. He's going, if we're spending X amount here, how much am I getting in return? Because I don't care whether we're spending, like, we don't have to look at marketing and go like, oh, 5,000 Rand a month seems like so much less to spend than 50,000 Rand a month. But if you're getting a return of 10 times of your money, you want to be spending 50, 100, 150,000 Rand on marketing. You want to be actually justifying spending more marketing if you're spending in the right place. So I'd say diversify marketing. Obviously know your target market and market in the right channels. And keep a close eye on that return and invest heavily in the ones that show the greatest return. It sounds obvious. It sounds completely obvious. But that's what we've done, and it seems to have worked out for us.
It sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people don't do it, or they hope that word of mouth will spread. The awesome idea or awesome product that they have, and it's not necessarily the case. There's I think there are a lot of cool ways in which you can market and effective ways. So I think it's very necessary. Just a question on that: where does marketing rank in terms of your biggest line items for spend? I could imagine it wages and rent are the two big ones, but
Yep.
how close after that is marketing?
That comes in at third in terms of our ongoing, and then we'd look at in terms of expansion and development. I mean that's quite a big ticket item, but that's sporadically. That's not a monthly cost. That's as and when we do it. But yeah, those are our biggest overheads. Definitely marketing ranks third.
And one more
No,
question about the business. What makes a good escape room a good escape room? I can't just lock you up in this room and say figure it out. Right? That would be boring.
No, well, if you look at the state of this room, I mean,
it does look like a murder scene.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's something I've been grappling with for quite some time because. Sorry, I'm going to go on here a little bit because it's something I've been looking into quite.
This is your podcast. I'm merely the host.
So, I love games and I love this part of the thing. South Africa has the smaller market, and escape rooms have never taken off the way it has in Europe and the States. And as a result, we haven't developed our games to the standards they have. And even at HintHunt, and I acknowledge that. I know our games that we're giving for our casual customers, they love it. They're having the best time. They're still at the right level for that. But for the enthusiasts, the enthusiasts that travel the world, they're not at that same standard of like immersion and like wow factor, right? So to answer your question, like what makes a great escape game is a good narrative. And we've learned this over time where before, up until like 2017, 2018, narratives were like a byproduct. It was kind of just a reason why you're in this place to have to do this thing. But the more people have played, the more immersed they want to be. So they need a strong narrative, a strong storyline. They need to feel like a part of the storyline and it makes sense. You become your own hero in this movie, essentially, Great set design, again, for that immersion, you need to feel like you're in this realm. You can't feel like, okay, cool, you're in a ship that's going to be hit by a storm, or you need to recover lost jewels, but you feel like you're in an office space. You need to feel like you're in that ship. You need to be immersed, right? And that goes with the look and the feel, the smell, even in the room, the ambient music that you play. It's got to sound a certain way so that it feels real and also heightens that sense of urgency. And then a good combination of puzzles, and problem solving. So you could have dexterity puzzles, logic puzzles, word problems, math problems, whatever, a whole combination of these that need to appeal to totally different skill sets so you don't alienate anybody, in this team, because it is a group game and you want different people to show their strengths and be able to contribute. You want to stump, one or two people, but the other people in the team can cover for that. You want to challenge the different skill sets. But those puzzles also need to be relevant to both the theme and the storyline. So it's like a very, very tricky balance. It can't be a linear game. So a linear game is where this puzzle has to be solved, then this puzzle, because that alienates players, because people can't be working on different things at the same time. It needs to be more of an open game where multiple puzzles or problems can be worked on at the same time to get to a certain point to then progress, so there's so many different elements, and that's something I've been really, really looking closely at and listening to a really, really cool podcast on. And our games are at a good standard, but they're not at that world class standard yet. And that's our mission over the next couple of months, is to get them to that world class standard. And I'm super excited about it. We're partnering with a guy who's designing what seems to be this really cool game that we're excited to launch, and hopefully going to be launching at the end of August. So hopefully we're going to start hitting those levels, and then I can show you what is a really truly great escape game at that point.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. Dino, let's talk a bit about you. I mean, it's quite clear that you're an action oriented person. Now, as much as you'll say you procrastinate and you're lazy, you are still action oriented. You're more action oriented than most.
Okay.
That much we know.
Okay, yeah.
I'd love to know, like, if you look back at your childhood, why do you think that's the case? And that's one question. The other is, what is your first memory of creating something from scratch, or taking an idea and turning it into something?
Oh, dude. Okay, that's quite interesting. I'll start with the memory one. I used to love Lego, man. I think like most kids, and that's my earliest memories of creation is Lego, and obsessing over building like my own version of like a rocket ship that had the most boosters. I can still see it right now, right? Like vividly, like the ones I built. And the more flipping engines and boosters this thing had, the cooler it was, So that was my like. So I loved Lego, which is quite interesting, because I've never considered myself a creative person, but yeah, that's my earliest memory of creating something. Super proud of it, loved it. In terms of what experiences might have, led me to be action oriented, I can't tell you, man. I was terribly lazy at school, and I know this is not good for this kind of segment, but terribly lazy at school, but did well enough, that I didn't have to work hard or at all. Bad trait. Should have ironed it out. Procrastinated hard all the way throughout school, and still have those traits. But what I did always love was a challenge. So sports was a big thing for me, and I was crap at sports until I decided to work hard at them and not be crap, and I think just working this out as I speak to you, it was in my journey to find some sort of self-confidence, which I had like very, very little self-confidence. And then I said, at some point I was like, well, I'm gonna have to like fake it till I make it, or just do things until it develops. And I started putting myself out there. I did like all the public speaking, debating, drama, and the sports, and this. I put myself like completely out there, and times it was harder. Like getting on stage and actually being a crappy actor that couldn't sing or dance and doing musicals was a bad idea. Picked up a lot of flack, but picking up that flack and realizing that, hey, you're still alive. Like I was like, okay, cool. It's not the scariest thing to try things. And then actually finding some sort of confidence by the end of my like schooling career, even if it was like pieced together, of like what was once this shattered child, I suppose, is now like pieced together like semblance of a human being with a bit of confidence. I think, I suppose that experience maybe led me to be what you consider somebody who takes action, right? Yeah.
No, it's. I think that's a perfectly good answer.
Thanks for the validation.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. No, but it's funny, right? Like, you know me very well, so like I love psychology, and I'm definitely I don't like to give advice, but I like to analyze.
Yeah.
Without any sort of certification. So it could all be incorrect, but I'll always find things that mirror in my own life. But the one, like, as you're talking, and everyone knows this about you, is you are so good at being disarming, because you're always putting yourself down in some way, but it's like it's part of the Dino charm and your humor, right?
Thanks, man.
But that talking about building self-confidence, it's one of those things that I know I do that also to some extent.
Yeah.
It's when you're growing up and when you're trying to find that self-confidence, it's a thing of, I'm going to beat anyone to the punchline so that I'm putting myself down before you get a chance to.
Correct.
And it's funny how those sorts of experiences can manifest and can, as you work on it and as you find your confidence, how it builds out into something completely different. And hey, here you are with your own business, right? I was telling Santini in our chat that she mentioned her family didn't have, they were comfortable, they didn't necessarily have a lot, and that drive to become financially stable led her towards business. And I said, I had the exact same thing, but that manifested in me studying harder and wanting to find stability through a job. And I always find it fascinating how we can have similar experiences but just go in completely divergent paths.
Yes.
But no, it's so great to see with that, right? And where you are today and everything that you've experienced as a self-starter, as a business person, what, where do you get your energy from? And I think you're going to say a lot around the people and being responsible for staff, and
Yes.
maybe that's a part of it, but also who or what do you draw your inspiration from? Like what aids you in your thinking and makes you better in being a business person?
I think that the first thing that kind of popped to mind, because when you first started asking the question, I wasn't sure how to answer it, and then something cropped up. I was like, I think my competitive nature actually is a part of that driving force. I kind of touched on that. Our games aren't at the level that the European games are at, and I'm like, well, it's okay for South Africa. Like, we're ahead of the game here, but the competitor in me is like, no. But I want to produce the best. Like, I want to produce at the highest level we possibly can. And I think that provides a bit of energy and motivation. I think that's probably one of my biggest drivers, actually, now that I think of it, outside of the people and being accountable to people and fulfilling that role and wanting to to look after everything.
Two more questions.
Yeah.
So one is looking back at your journey, looking forward at what's ahead. If someone had to come up to you and say 3 points, 3 things I need to do to be a self-starter, to turn my idea into action, what are you telling them? Your elevator pitch.
Oh my word, you're putting me on the spot, and this is like probably I don't feel qualified to be able to give this, and I'm like, I don't know the 3 points.
You were basically a forensic auditor to uncover shady dealings in your business.
No.
You have expansion plans.
No.
You have a fully fledged business. You are more than qualified.
So 3 points to become a self-starter. I think one of the things is again cliche, like find something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, because the hard work that it takes to follow through, that becomes less hard or less taxing, or it feels a lot less like work when you are passionate about it and you enjoy it. So definitely whatever it is that you're embarking on, make sure that there's a different payoff that's not financial. Maybe you're not super passionate about it, but you feel good doing it. Or maybe it's not what you're passionate about, but the impact it can have on people is what you're passionate about. But make sure that it's not just a financial payoff that you're after. I would say, because if you're struggling to be a self-starter and you're struggling with motivation, well, enjoying something is a great motivator. To due diligence, no, that's not just she's like, I think again, don't bog yourself down with too many of the fine details. Now I know I said do your due diligence, right? And earlier in the podcast we kind of touched on, like, you would analyze your way out of anything I would feel and justify into anything. Find that middle ground where you do your homework, you do your due diligence, you do look at like the hard facts that are available to you, but also trust your gut. Don't get bogged down by too many of the small details. I think the point I'm trying to make here actually really is, you don't have to know how the end goal works right now, or how you're going to get to the end goal right now, because the journey to that end goal is probably going to change along the way, and it's going to probably look a bit different when you get there. So don't be afraid to start. You don't have to have all the answers when you start. You definitely don't have. You're not going to. No matter how hard you look, you're not going to have all the answers when you start. So don't be afraid of starting because you don't know all the answers. Go in as informed as you possibly can, but know that there's a lot you're going to learn on your journey that's going to build it to a better level than what it would have been at if you just sat and thought about it, until you died. I should summarize that probably better.
No,
So
it's fine. Yeah.
be passionate. Don't be afraid to get started. You don't have to know all the answers. And thirdly, sure, if I had to give a third point, yeah, I mean, it ties everything relates to each other, but don't be scared of that failure, right? Like failure's pretty crap. Again, these are like all three cliches. Like failure sucks, right? But there's so much learning that happens in that failure, and chances are, like, if you're doing things right, with the right motivation, and you're putting in the right work, and it's not failing for the wrong reasons, chances are the lessons that you're going to learn through that are going to translate to the next thing that you're going to be able to build up to be more successful than what it could have been had you not learned those lessons through the failure. So definitely, this is probably one of the hardest things, that is fear of failure. That's probably one of the biggest mental hurdles people have to get over. And there's, I don't know if there's much I can say to to make that fear any smaller. But if you have that fear, I can't say just don't have fear and go for it. Like, if you have that fear, just know that failure isn't as bad as what you think it is, and it's far more useful than what you think it is. If you do hit a failure, I mean, who knows? You might just be successful first time round.
I think the fear of failure and getting over it, I think, is an excellent point, especially in this space where creating something from scratch is daunting. And I've found, what has helped me is, again, I'm going back to the psychology, but understanding what is the underlying reason why I'm afraid of that failure. And it's generally the same thing. I'm always worried. I'm a very externally focused person, so I'm always worried that people are going to look at me and be like, "Yes, look at this oak, what a clown," And then you realize that you do something, like I start this podcast, and even if I'm speaking to an audience of one, everyone is so busy with their life that they don't actually care what I'm doing. It's because I'm the center of my own story. I always view it from that perspective. But for most people, I am just the side character whilst they're on their own quest.
Yep.
And so for someone who, like me, is externally motivated, it is very liberating to be like, people don't actually care what I'm doing.
Yep.
I don't have to be afraid. So yeah, it'll be different for everyone, but knowing the reason behind it helps a bit in dismantling it. Now, we're at the last question, which for some reason, and as a strategy consultant, it is actually horrific the amount of questions I've asked you that actually are two questions in one. Like, that is very bad interview, like best practice. It should always be one clear question. So I'll break it down into two parts. Having gone on the journey you have up until this point, you're 31 now, right?
Yep.
Are you proud of yourself?
I actually am. And the reason is that maybe I haven't got it all figured out. Financially, I'm still recovering from which was a difficult time. So, but I am recovering. But the reality is, I'm in a position where, I've got a bit of that freedom to be able to enjoy things outside of work, where I'm not bogged down by only work. My world is bigger than that, and I get to enjoy that world. I, do something that I really, really enjoy, and there's opportunity for me to grow with that. As it grows, I can grow with it. And that's super exciting. That's really rewarding. And despite all these like challenges and these flipping things that have happened, I'm now in this place where I get to enjoy those things, and the business is in a positive position where it can still grow. So, although I'm not proud of every characteristic or every part of my journey that's happened, and I'm not proud of some of the character traits I've shown along the way that led to some of my failures, I am proud of the fact that I've gotten through those, and by which way, I'm now here, in a positive position, through a lot of my own actions. So yeah, I am. I can say I'm proud of myself to a large degree.
I'm glad to hear. I definitely think you should be. And last question: If you were somehow standing in front of 6-year-old Dino, right? What about your journey would you tell them to look forward to the most?
What, as an entrepreneur, or 6-year-old Dino would want to hear about the skydiving? Which
it's
no, I think
you can talk about life in general, and also then a bit about being an entrepreneur. But there's obviously no right answer to this.
6-year-old Dino would look forward to a bit of the I'd say the confidence that I found, because that was like foreign. There was no ways I was ever gonna be confident. Not in my world, you know. The confidence that I found to go out and do things and try things, both in business and personal life. And yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates everything, because, you know, that was starting skydiving, that was, you know, getting better at sport, you know, through finding a bit of confidence, that was starting businesses, being able to fail and recover. So I think 6-year-old Dino would be excited by the fact that it's not all gloom and doom, that he'll actually amount to something at some stage, you know, even if it's not at the multi-million-dollar level or like an Elon Musk kind of thing, but, you know, something that he's going to enjoy, he's gonna have fun doing. You know, that's pretty cool.
Sounds like 6-year-old Dino is having an existential crisis.
From 6 all the way through to like 17 and a half at the very least, and then again sporadically throughout. But yeah.
You wouldn't be Dino if that wasn't the case.
No, not at all.
Mr. Dino, thank you so much for joining me on the Self Starters. I think I've said this about everyone, but I truly mean it. You know, hearing your story is inspirational. I think the practical advice and the lessons you've shared across your journey will help, I think, numerous people. I'd love to say thousands, but at this point, tens of people who are listening. If it counts for anything, it will definitely help me on my own journey. That. So, yeah, thank you so much for the wisdom and the advice and delivering it in a very Dino Paulo way, which is very self-deprecating and with a lot of doubt. But there's a lot of wisdom, and yeah, I think as the podcast host, but also as your friend, I look forward to the next season of not just your journey, but also of HintHunt. I think there's some big things on the horizon, and I wish you nothing but success. Last thing, where can people find you? Where can people find HintHunt? Let everyone know the most important parts of yourself.
Yeah, for substandard content, you can follow me on Instagram at that guy Dino, or also Dino on Twitter. You know, not the most interesting, but yeah, give a follow. But in terms of HintHunt, www.hinthunt.co.za. Yeah, do follow us, check us out, even if you're not based in Cape Town, because the chances are in the next, you know, couple of months or year, we'll have something for you regardless of where you're at. So, and if you are in Cape Town, do check us out, check our experiences out, and do let me know how they go. You know, pop me a message if you want to try it out, if you've got any questions. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to share that experience with you.
Dino Paulo, thank you so much.
Kirinadi, thank you.